Hello everyone, and welcome to a new episode of my Flosstube. It's been a while. It's been over a month since my last episode. I had planned to do a much earlier episode again, but it's been crazy busy. I was featured last month in a national newspaper. They even quoted me on the cover. It's this issue here. That's not me, by the way, although my hair was quite long. But that's me just down there in this article, which was really lovely. It was about an exhibition at the Frisian Museum. So originally, as I have mentioned, I think in the past, I'm from the north of the Netherlands, from a province called Friesland, and there's the National Museum there has a beautiful exhibition on at the moment for about embroidery. Of course, with lockdown, I've not been able to see that yet. I don't even think the museum itself is open, but it looks like a spectacular exhibition and I really can't wait to actually see that. However, to celebrate that, they asked 3 stitchers in the Netherlands to share their story about stitching, why they stitch and how they stitch and everything. And it was really lovely. So on the back of that, I got a lot of interest from people in the Netherlands to do collaborations and things in magazines. So there have been some really exciting talks, but about that a little bit more in the future. Another thing that happened was I was asked by the lovely Japanese magazine, which you will remember from a previous episode probably. That's this one here, Stitchy Days, and they asked me to design a stitch along with them, and I was really honoured about that. So yes, the stitch along is appearing in the upcoming issue of Stitchy Days, which is the April issue. I believe that will be actually number 33 or 34. I think it's 33. I'll find it out and I'll put a link in below if there is a link to it yet. But you will be able to, I think, order it from Amazon if you're outside of Japan, and some other shops as well. But if you have a look about Stitchy Days, Japanese embroidery magazine, I have had some comments about where they could the lovely Anne of Green Gables chart. That's not by me. It is really, really pretty. I did not design that one. My design is just down here, and that is available as a kit that you can buy through this magazine as well. But yeah, it's a really beautiful magazine. I am super excited about the stitch along for this one. I can't really share anything about it, which is a pity because I really want to tell you a little bit about it, but you will see it as soon as I get the copy of the actual magazine in my hands. I have not seen it yet. I've seen the mock-ups that they've sent me and it looks really good. But yeah, that will be very exciting. So that was one of the things that happened. The other thing that happened after my last video, I shared with you the freebie Black Lives Matter one that I designed. I'll show it properly like this. I talk a bit about it in my last video and about craftivism. I think most of you understood what I meant to say with that video. It was not a video that I made to get nice messages from you guys, although that's much appreciated, but it is to hammer home the point that we do need to do something about institutionalized racism everywhere in the world, and we need to try and be an inclusive community and a society, and I think most of you understood that point. There have been some really amazing messages from you guys as well, and some really lovely video replies, which I really, really appreciate. One I especially want to talk about, as it was a really moving video and it actually brought me to tears. It was Denise of Black Ribbon Stitch Studio, and her video was just really moving. She talks about her dislike as a black woman of traditional samplers, and it really shows you how you can completely look at a different in a different view as a white person or as a BIPOC person do something. So it's really good to remember these things, I think. So I will link to Denise's video below here. I really recommend checking that one out. Also, Denise's glasses look amazing, by the way, that she got. There is also a new Flosstuber, Emma from the UK, Stitchman Darcy Cameron. He was kindly peer pressuring, I guess, her into doing a Flosstube of her own. So welcome, Emma. I've really enjoyed your first video. I really like the progress you're making on my stitch along. So that was very nice to see, and I hope you'll do many more videos. Last thing of the sort of housekeeping bits. I have been approached by several people that there is a WhatsApp group apparently that is sharing illegal patterns. Now, this is not just for me, but this is as general designers. We do this to make designs for you, but we also do this because it is our livelihood, and illegally sharing patterns genuinely hurts our income. And I know for a fact that most of you who watch this are really, really kind and wouldn't dream of illegally sharing files or just giving away PDFs to other people. But it does hurt us. When you do that, it is, in a way, just sharing files and giving them away. You might think it's just a PDF file. It doesn't really hurt, but it does hurt my sales in the end of the day, and it means less income for me. So please don't share stuff. When you come across the WhatsApp group, please do let me know, because I would like to take some action. The main problem I have with this group is that apparently they have released my stitch along, but as a full pattern, which I'm not happy with at all, because the idea is that it's a stitch along and every month one part of the stitch along will be released. And apparently there is a pattern circulating. Someone has graphed the whole thing, probably with lots of mistakes as well, but even if it is a perfect graph, it's not nice. So if you know who is doing it or who is sharing that, do let me know, because I do want to take some action against this. Anyway, enough sort of housekeeping stuff. I'm going to dive right in with some works in progress, because I think that's probably more exciting to see than me yammer on about that. So I'll start with this one. Last year, at the beginning of the lockdown, I thought it would be fun to have a summer stitch along. Then we moved houses and then it went into a drawer and I never touched it again. But my Love Thy Neighbour pattern, I'm really excited about starting this one again. I really like it. I think I stitched this with DMC 3750 on some very, very lightly dyed linen. It's 40 count. And this has been actually a really nice relaxing stitch, but for some reason it ended up in the works in progress pile, the WIP pile, and I've not touched this one again. But I am making a promise to myself that I do want to finish this year, preferably this summer, and still make it a summer stitch along, even if I'm the only one still stitching it, because I think everyone has probably finished this one by now. That was joining on this project. But yeah, I've seen some really, really amazing versions of this design, some really beautiful, colourful ones. But yeah, that has been very exciting. So that's one that I'm working on. The other one, which is another stitch along, which is my 2021 stitch along. As I said, I've been super, super busy these last weeks, actually the last months. Which has resulted in me not getting enough time to actually put into this particular project. But my 2021 stitch along, I managed to get a few stitches in, and I've done some of the dark stitches, so the outline bits and bobs, and it's starting to look nice now. The whole top bit is now basically finished, which is quite nice. I just need to do the lighter floss in and then continue. The only thing with this pattern, not the pattern, but with the stitching, and I've not been enjoying that, is, and I don't know if this is just me or if it's old floss or something like that, but I'm stitching it with the 939. Now the light version I've not had much problems with. That's the 932. The 939, however, has been fraying like mad, the DMC one, and I don't know what it is. It is kind of making me dread to stitch this project, actually, because I really don't enjoy working with this really fraying thread. And as you can see, these are not super long threads either. It's not like I'm working with meters of floss, but it's just it's been annoying because you start stitching and after a couple of threads, a couple of crosses, it just cuts off. It just sort of breaks and frays and does. So yeah, I've not been enjoying that particularly. But that's the SAL, and I'll be jumping back on that one as well. Then I decided, because there's not enough stitch starts in my life, so I thought like, oh, let's just pick up something else as well. So I did my Swedish one, which is this one here. It's the Hälsingland Hearts, and this one actually stitches up quite quickly because there's quite a lot of negative space in this one. I found that there's quite a bit of negative space. I've been really thoroughly enjoying this one. I just need to do the little corner sort of flowers or stars there, and the center ones with the little leaves, and then the big outline there, and then this is done. I've worked on this exactly 1 week, and that was quite intense stitching as well, to be honest with you, because I took a week off to just sort of empty my mind, work on some stuff. There was a lot of stuff that I needed to do, and sometimes you just need to clear your mind, and I thought like, I'm just going to do that, just focus on something completely. But yeah, I can't wait actually to get back to this one. It's really annoying because I don't remember actually which floss this is. I need to try and chase that up. I think it was the 930, I think. Yes, it is the 930, which is a really nice antique blue. I like that color. So that's that one, Hälsingland Hearts. The other one that I started is this one, which is my Transylvanian spring pattern, and this is stitched, this was stitched on 32 count, by the way, and this is stitched on 40 count. I think this is 40 or 36. I'm not 100% sure about that, but this has been really enjoyable as well to do, and this is quite nice because I don't have to think too much about this one. So this is something that's really enjoyable if you don't really want to think about your pattern, because once you've done one of these little funny flower leaf things, you can just crack on and repeat them without making too many mistakes. That's that one. The other start I've made was the Telemark Fancy, as you can see here, and that's this one here, and I'm making nice progress on that. This was sort of a nice relaxed stitch for me. It's 40 count, and I'm stitching it with Cotona Madeira cotton, and that just comes in a cone of 200 meters like this. Now, this is really nice to stitch with, but I have to be honest that I prefer the Coats cotton, or Coats/Mez cotton. That's a number 50, and I really enjoy stitching with that one over the Cotona. But this is quite nice as well for a change. And it's just nice. I love stitching on these little cones because the thread is super strong. and there's just really gorgeous colours available. And this is a nice stitch, and this is a little bit like my Hälsingland had. So Hälsingland is a area in Sweden. That's this one here. Now this is inspired by Hälsingland, but this is not something you would ever see actually in Hälsingland. Likewise, I call this telemark fancy, and I thought I really should use the word fancy in the title for this one, as it is my interpretation of the crafts of Norway / the telemark region. But again, it is a fancy. This is not something you would actually see in telemark. But yeah, I've been really enjoying it. I love those primitive little forms and shapes and zigzag things with the 8-leaf roses, or in this case it's a 4-leaf because it's just a little half of that one. But yeah, they're great fun to stitch. And this one is, if you don't make mistakes, this one is quite straightforward to stitch. I had done, minus this little leaf thing, I had done the whole corner here as well, plus the leaves, but it turned out that I had made a dumb mistake in this bit here. So instead of it just going zigzag like that, I had done one cross too many, which resulted in the whole thing being off massively. And I spent, because it's 40 count and it's a very fine, strong thread, and it was a nightmare to unpick. So I think I must have spent well over 2 hours very carefully, 2.5 hours more likely, very carefully cutting and picking thread by thread and trying to get it clean again. So, but we're now ready, and now I can start stitching on this one again. So I have a nice haul this time. I've got haul both in the form of samplers. I won't show all of them to you today, but I have some really nice samplers which I do want to show you. Some of them I have charted, some of them I will be charting, some of them I might chart, but I thought it'd be fun to show them to you anyway. So the first one I will show today, I have charted it already. I just need to do the last checks. And then I will release that pattern, but the booklet is nearly finished, so that will be the coming 1 or 2 weeks. I think this one should be coming out, and I am dedicating a special Flosstube episode to this sampler and to its maker, because I have discovered some really exciting things about her family and actual living family members that I have spoken to and interviewed for this Flosstube, so that's very exciting. But it is this absolutely gorgeous sampler, and it was stitched in 1813 by Martha Knock. And Martha Knock was a girl who was born in 1801 in London. Her father was a gunsmith. He was quite a famous gunsmith. He had offices on Fleet Street and later in Regent Street, so the family was quite well off. She had a very famous uncle as well called Henry, who was also a gunsmith. He was even more famous, and her father actually was an apprentice with her great uncle Henry, I should say, not uncle. But yeah, there's a lot of information that I have on this sample, and there will be a proper full episode about her once the sampler is released. I would say it'll probably be 2 weeks, keep it. So we're looking probably sort of first, second week of April. But I'm very excited about this one. I saw this one and I absolutely fell in love with that beautiful green that she used, because there's a lot of different colors of green in this sampler. And I love the meander patterns that she has used here, and I found it quite interesting as well that it nearly looks like a Roman a painting with its meanders here and its sort of really strict little trees that she's painted. I'm saying painted because it does to me look like a painting, but it's a really charming sampler, this one. In contrast to previous samplers where I think of releasing both a full crosses and an accurate one, this one will only be released as a full accurate sampler, because to honor the sampler it's too tricky to actually make this a full crosses version. For instance, the little posy here is stitched completely over one, which is such an integral element of this sampler. Also the little satin stitch triangles here with her name stitched over one is something that is very hard to replicate over two. So I thought this one will only be available as it is here. And that's Martha Knock. I'll put it carefully away here. Another sampler that came to me is a Dutch one, which is this very heavy, and I hope there's not too much glare, so I'll sort of move it a little bit about, but it's this absolute beautiful woolwork one. It's not a hugely old sampler. It's from, I believe, 1858, but it is really charming. I love the colours, and I especially love these two rabbits here, which I think are very charming and which are seen on samplers that are much older than this one. So it's very much a 19th century Dutch sample of this, except for this weird rabbit thing, which is a testament to the stitcher, who probably copied something from a much older example here, which is always quite nice to see that. Put this carefully here. Then I have this beautiful sampler, which is an Armenian sampler, which I purchased from the US, but just look at this. It's stitched on like a cheesecloth type material, but it is just gorgeous. It's stitched with wool, very thick red wool, like a turkey red, and it is just really spectacular. The red is still very vivid, and it's just really beautiful how this sampler has been worked. I love the horse that you can see there, but I particularly love the alphabets. When I saw it initially, I was really confused because I couldn't read it, and it looks like Western letters at first glance, like these beautiful Gothic letters. But of course, once you look properly, they turn out to be Armenian letters. So it's the full Armenian alphabet, both here in the Gothic version and in a more sort of, I guess, lowercase version here as well. But it's just really spectacular. So I will be doing more research into this sample. I won't find out who stitched this, unfortunately, but I do love this one. It's a really charming sample. I'm definitely planning to chart this one. I thought I would share that with you today. So that's the Armenian sampler. I've got a couple of samplers as well from France, which is quite exciting. So there's this one here. No, this one is actually from Italy, sorry. A really charming sampler from Italy, this one. Am I holding it upside down? Yeah, I am. That's this one here. It's on a proper sort of 19th century, early 20th century gauzy material that's more used for upholstery, woolwork stuff than sampler making, or rather I should say it's more suitable for that. A lot of samplers from this period were actually stitched on this weird stuff. I'm never a really big fan of it, especially because it is so transparent, so if the stitch is not very tidy, you see all the loops that are done on the back. Luckily the girl was quite neat, and you don't see a huge amount of travelling on the back of this one. But it's a really charming little piece, this one. This one I probably won't chart unless there is a huge demand for it. Do let me know with the, what shall we call it? The Italian big letters, I'm going to call it. So if you want Italian big letters, do let me know, but I'm not sure if I should chart this one. I just really like the look of it. One sampler I probably won't chart either, but I do want to share you because it's just fun. This one arrived a little while ago, but I haven't shown it yet. Is this huge Welsh sampler, but I thought this tree at the center was just really fantastic. Looks like a motherboard or something like that, like an electro chip. It's really weird. And then there's this sort of psychedelic little bird in the tree there. which looks very Joseph in a Technicolor Dreamcoat to me. This one is actually commemorating the wedding of this couple in 1848, which I thought was quite charming. I think it's Wilstow, isn't it? What does it say? Wistow. Yeah, it says Wistow. But it's really, really nice, this one. I love the colours. It's very unusual with the clashing pinks and oranges and everything. And the big borders that she's stitched. She didn't finish it, and I don't really want to add anything to this sampler either, but I do think it is really, really charming. I might have a look if I find some other unfinished Welsh samplers that I might do something like cobbling them together, but that won't happen in the very foreseeable future. I've got 2 more samplers, and these ones I actually have charted. First, I'll start with this one here, Augusta Bronner, and this is a really, really lovely, simple red schoolwork sampler. Now, there's nothing special about this sampler in many ways, and that sounds a bit mean when I say that, but what I mean is the red schoolwork samplers are not unique. However, I found this really charming because what is really nice is that you can very, very clearly see in this one all the stitching techniques that Augusta was taught. So first she did a very simple here, a running stitch. So she started by starting over 2, under 2, over 2, under 2, like that, until the end. Then the second row she started doing a back stitch. So basically she started going like this, over 2, back 4, over 2, back 4. So you sort of loop it, and that's like a proper running stitch there. And then she repeated that with what looks on the front to be a running stitch again, but it's actually a back stitch that is worked with a skip. So you have, instead of over 4 at the back, you work over 6 threads. I have released this exactly as it is, with the same little mistakes that she made as well, with the, for instance, the running stitch, the back stitch here. There's a few mistakes in the alphabets as well, but I thought I would replicate this exactly as it is. Now, this chart comes also with an empty piece of graph the same width as this sampler, which means that you can personalize this fully. So you can put your own name in, you can put your own date in. And the reason I charted this one as well was because it is fun to stitch these samplers anyway, but I thought it would be really nice if someone wants to learn how to stitch and how to cross stitch. You could actually start by stitching this sampler first. So just start with a very basic running stitch, then do your back stitch, and then start very simply with the cross stitches. And the crosses, it really builds up. So first she does a jumping cross, then there's one little more jump extra, and then the borders get slowly more complex. Now, why I really like this sampler is that in the late 19th century, education changed in Europe. For instance, in the Netherlands in 1878, there was a new school law signed where, for instance, the size of classes was halved. Instead of having 80 children in a classroom, only 40 children, up to 40 children were allowed, which meant that schools could actually provide much better lessons to the children. But it also meant that a sort of a more standardized curriculum was introduced, and part of that was useful and beautiful crafts for girls, and they were required by the school curriculum to complete stitch work such as this. And the interesting thing is this actually cut 2 ways, because before that the stitching was done in a home situation where the girl would not go to school or have very basic education, but she would be taught by an aunt, her mother, a cousin, or an older sister, and that's how the stitching was passed on. And this was all done in a sort of a home setting outside of a curriculum. I can't say curriculum today. And it was done in like a local tradition. So what you would see, for instance, you would recognize the samplers from one village to the next, because there was traditions that had been handed down, just like the traditional costumes that differed from village to village. The stitching differed as well. Now, because of the national curriculum, it meant that suddenly it was a nationalized form of crafts, which completely obliterated all of the original sort of notifiers that you would have for a region. Now, with Augusta's sampler, for instance, I purchased it as being a French sampler from the Alsace, but it could just as well be a sampler stitched in the north of the Netherlands around the same time, because it is basically the same thing. It's very, very hard to actually distinguish. Perhaps you could distinguish in some of the materials that some of the girls used. Experts will probably look at them and say like, oh yeah, in France they use more of this material, but it is not like in the past where you would say like, oh, they stitched this alphabet, or they stitched this type of border, or this decorative element. It belongs to this kind of school, or it belongs to this village. And it's interesting because it is beautiful, but it is also sort of ringing sort of a death knell for the old traditions of stitching. But this one is available now in my shop, and you can personalize it, and I hope people will personalize it, because I think it is really exciting to do that. Or you could stitch Augusta's name and date. It's up to you. I've also included the DMC colors that are very close to this here, and the linen color as well. So yeah, you can get as close to it as possible. So before I show you the very last sampler in my collection, I do want to share just a few books that I got as well. The first one was a set of books that I had bought quite some time ago, but I managed to complete the set. And it is the 7 works by Maria van Hemert. She was a Dutch textile expert, and she wrote beautiful books on embroidery and traditional techniques in the Netherlands. And those would be the techniques that, as I touched on with this previous sampler, they disappeared in sort of the late 19th century, although some traditions remained a little bit longer in some communities. But Maria van Hemert collected a lot of the techniques, and she wrote some excellent works on traditional stitching techniques, and she published a series of tiny little books in the 1940s, keeping the traditions of stitching alive, and they just really look really beautiful when you look at all those lovely colors of the little books, and they're beautifully illustrated as well, so it shows you all of the techniques, how to do traditional techniques like this, and it's just beautifully done. So I was very excited to get that complete. Another title that arrived is this absolutely glorious title. Now it's published by a author called Joke Visser, and she is a collector of samplers, and this is a really beautiful volume where she has gathered beautiful examples of stitching throughout the centuries in the Netherlands. The book is in Dutch, but if you understand French, there's a French summary as well, so it's sort of bilingual, this book. But there's no English in this one, unfortunately. But just purely to have for the absolutely stunning photographs in this, as you can see here, it is really special, and I'm very happy to have this one. Kind of wonder why I did not get this earlier. It has got a beautiful sort of embossed, I don't know if it shows up on the camera, but a really beautiful embossed shirt. But it's beautifully written, and the illustrations are really lovely. It's on a slightly matte finished paper as well, which is very pleasant to read. Another book that I got, and this book has been traveling for a very, very, very long time, from England. This is a book that you can purchase through the Sampler Guild, and it was written by Vivian Crellin Baldock. I've not finished the book yet. I have started quite a few chapters already, but it is beautifully written. It's a true labour of love by this gentleman, who also stitched the sampler that you can see on the cover of the book. And it's called Tokens of Love. It is really, really beautiful. It's beautifully illustrated. It gives a really good insight in the sampler making and what started samplers, where they came from, how people stitched them, how things were passed on, etc. And I like it because he seems to have a true heart for the difficult situation that people were living in. The charity schools that were being run at that time, and the charity schools might sound like a great idea, but they were actually often not as charitable as they sounded, and it's really quite fascinating to sort of read how the whole school system sort of came out to be. So yeah, this is a beautiful title. As I said, it had been traveling for a very, very long time to reach me. I had ordered this last year, and after about 2 months it still had not arrived. So I had written to the Sampler Guild, and they were very, very kind to me, and they said like, we will send you a new copy. And of course, as soon as she said, I've posted the book to you, the doorbell rings, and there the book arrives. So I said to them, I said like, when the second copy arrives, I will recommend it on my Flosstube once I've read it, and I will give the copy that is spare away. So I thought I would give this away. So if you use the word tokens as a plural, in the comments, I will randomly pick someone that uses this word. So if you fancy having this title, do let me know. I will pick someone through the random selector generator thing, and I will mail out a copy to you. If you do want to purchase this book, that's also possible. I will put the details below in the video, because you can get it from the Sampler Guild. But just keep in mind that mail from the UK with Corona at the moment is taking much longer than usual. I feel really bad not being more patient, but we both thought that after 2 months that most likely this had gone lost in the mail, but as always, a few minutes later there it was. But that's this one here. And before I show you my last sampler, I want to show you one little finish that I had. Because I don't have any other finishes that I can show you in this episode. Now, as most of you who have seen my channel will know by now, I only stitch my own patterns because I just don't have time to stitch all the things, even though I would love to. And there are so many amazing patterns out there, but you just don't have the time, and I need to take my stitchy time to stitch the samples that I need for myself. However, sometimes you see something that's small enough and quick enough to stitch, and really speaks to you that you can't not stitch it. So Bart, Park Hopper Bart, he released a really lovely, charming little sampler. This one you can get through his website. I will link to that in here as well. You can find Bart on Instagram and on Flosstube. Look for Park Hopper Bart and you will find him. I'll link to that here as well. And this one is called La Musique, and pardon my French, I don't speak it, but I can try and sound as French as possible. La musique est le silence entre les notes, which basically means music is the silence between the notes. And I really like that quote because it's Debussy, and I mean I really like Debussy. I was actually stitching this listening to a beautiful piano album I'll put a little link in here. Actually, it's one of my favorite interpretations of his piano works, which was very enjoyable. But I listened to a whole bunch of classical albums while I was stitching to this, and it is also a quote I think that seems to have spoken to the composer Arvo Pärt, who speaks a lot about silence in his music. But as some of you might know, I compose music myself. I do the little piano interludes and things that you sometimes hear in my videos. But I've written some piano music myself as well. There's an album that's out that you can find on Spotify as well, and I'll link to that one as well. But yeah, it speaks to me, but not only in music, but it's like a sort of a philosophical thing as well, that you can look at it as the empty space in a design as well. It's not just the silence in music that makes the music, but it's also the empty space around a design. So it's for me a really good reminder of just a nice thought to think of when designing. So thank you, Bart, for this really charming design, and it's very cheap as well. So if you like this, I really loved stitching that gorgeous little lyre at the top here. But yeah, that's this one. This brings me to the final one. I'm really excited to share this with you. This pattern is now available in my shop, and it's available not as one pattern but as two separate options. But I'll show you the design first. Just a little thing, this is actually the most finely stitched sampler that I have both seen and that I own. It is worked absolutely exquisitely. This is the sampler. It is an Italian sampler from 1875. I'm lying about the dates now. Yeah, 1875. And it is just spectacular. When you look at the smallness of the stitches, it is absolutely incredible. I will try and get this actually a little bit closer to the camera so you can fully see. And that's just, it's insanely fine. I counted the threads roughly because it is not a purely even weave material that she stitched on, but she stitched it according to the lady that I bought it from. I bought it from a lady in Italy, and she was told by her mother that it was stitched by her grandmother, and they called it basically the handkerchief embroidery, or the embroidered hanky, they kind of lovingly called it in their family. And I thought it was very moving, but when I actually received the sampler, I understood why they called it the embroidered hanky, because it is a handkerchief. It is very fine material, as you can see, and the colors are still remarkably well preserved. The front and the back are pretty much the same colors. There is some stitch loss in the alphabets, which I managed to restore for the sampler because I could, based on what the patterns are like on all the samplers, I could sort of look and compare and fill in the gaps, so to speak. But it is a spectacular sampler. Now, I was struggling to find a name for this because we don't know with certainty who the maker is. The lady, she told me that, let me just look what she said the maker was. She thought it is Teresa Rochella. Now, it is possible that it was stitched by Teresa, as there is a TR initial here. It is here, right? So yes, it is here. It is so small. I had to take photos and very high resolution photographs to actually be able to count the crosses to chart this. and it is a big chart. It is 400 and let me just check that for you. 445 crosses wide and 482 crosses high, and still it is this small. So you can sort of see that if you would stitch this on 32 count linen, you would be looking at some 28 by 30 inches, which is about 70.5 by 76 centimeters, which is a considerable large, at least for my designs. At least it is one of the largest designs that I have released, but I thought this was absolutely stunning. But it kind of reminded me, when I was working on this, it reminded me of a Bristol sampler. And one of the reasons is there's a couple of Bristol samplers. Most famously, there's the beautiful Bristol sampler with a huge squirrel. But it reminded me of that because there is on that sampler also an elephant which is looking the other way, but it's nearly the same identical Bristol sampler elephant as on the Bristol sampler. But it is just a really, really beautiful sampler. Now, while I was charting this, I was very curious what it would look like actually if it had been a Bristol sampler and if it had been stitched completely monochrome, because of course the Bristol samplers were super small stitched as well. So I made two versions, but I had to redraw the monochrome. So because this is a pattern, it's 30 pages. The booklet itself is 34 pages long, I believe, with a cover and some text and all these things. But the pattern itself is 30 pages long, which means that I could not include two versions. I could not include a monochrome and a color version in that pattern. So what I have done is I have made two versions available, so you can choose in my shop whether you would like to stitch this version, which is using the colors. Of course you can substitute the colors to colors you like better, but it's charted for color. If you however want to do a monochrome version, you can go to the monochrome version and find that one as well in my shop. And for that particular one, I had to redraw, sort of leave out elements in the alphabets. I had to redraw certain things like the elephant and the heart here, and the birds here. I had to reinterpret. I had to be very clever in avoiding stitches, removing them where they had been, like for instance the little black dots on the birds here. I had to make sure that they were removed, and then I had to insert little blank spaces to make sure that you could still see that there was a separation between the colors. So the color version is very authentic to the original sampler. The red version, the monochrome version, is my interpretation, but is very true in spirit to that one. So that is this one, and this sampler, basically to honor its Italian heritage, I have chosen to name it Il Fazzoletto Ricamato, which means, and sorry if I horribly butcher that Italian by the way, but Il Fazzoletto Ricamato means the handkerchief embroidery. Yeah, and I think this is really beautiful. So yes, and I thought what would be quite fun is that the booklet is 30 pages, and I thought if I do my best and stitch one page each week, which sounds more than it is really, because the pages have a lot of empty space here. So on page 1, for instance, this is literally page 1. It's a little cross, the letter A, the letter N and the letter O, and then the top bit of this cross, the A and the B. That's literally everything that's on page 1. So I thought if I do every week one page, then by the end of the year I could have this sampler finished. And I thought it would be quite fun to make it a stitch along. So if you want to join me doing this as a stitch along, what shall we call it? The hanky SAL. I think we can call it the hanky SAL. So I'll put it here, or Italian hanky SAL maybe. Otherwise, I don't know. I'll have a look. I don't know which one yet. I'll put it here now, what the hashtag will be for this stitch along, and I'll post on my Instagram as well, so you can find more information about it. But yeah, There is no time limit. You can stitch it as fast or as slow as you want. But I thought it would be quite fun to do this as a stitch along, because there's not enough stitch alongs going on yet. But yeah, I hope you join me with this one. That having said, that brings us to the end of this episode. Wait, before you go, there's one more very, very important thing I nearly forgot. It has come to my attention that Ellen's ever expanding harem is not including me, which has been greatly upsetting me, obviously. So I thought I need to conquer Ellen's heart, and what better way is there to do that by a horribly cringy, embarrassing song. So Ellen, this is my love song for thee. By the way, I'm not going to play the whole thing. I'll link to this one. There's a terrible version in my SoundCloud, which is pretty much a one-take thing. I don't play the ukulele that well either, but yeah, it's a quick version that I cobbled together. But yeah, it sort of goes like this. I don't want to be your bit on the side. I just want to be your wife. Please don't let me be your bit on the side. Just make me your wife tonight. Just make me your wife tonight, Ellen Reed. Well, if you enjoyed it, do leave a little like there, and make sure to subscribe. I think I'm just about in time to finish this one because the sun is coming through, so it's getting very bright here again. And I might go for a nice little walk now and get some fresh air. I hope you all have a wonderful day. Stay safe, keep stitching, and I'll see you next time again. Bye bye.